I am here in actuality. I just needed to put myself on stream. Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to this second of our Dungeoneering 101 classes. Wow. Oops, let me turn on my light here. Let's get a little more brightness. There we go. Ryan Smith, that's what the track is on the stream countdown. It's something that I think is just called elevator music number 4 that I found from some site that had, free, royalty-free, free music. And I guess it must actually be free because I've used it on a bunch of streams and nothing's got dinged. So I guess it actually is kind of free. Yeah, it would be nice to know more because it is kind of catchy. I do find myself sort of bouncing along to the music when I hear it. Hey, Krister. Hey, the Dave. Let me get my other screen going here. I'm always dealing, I feel like, with technical issues right when I'm trying to do something, aka stream. But trying to get it together. Show that on stream. Let me move myself down here. Let me turn this slightly. Get out of the way. All right. Fluffy the Dragon, you are not late today. So I thought this would be a good part 2 of our look at dungeoneering in terms of if part 1 was kind of getting our general dungeon set up, and I will, if I can remember where I stuck that photo of our first, because I wasn't going to go through and do it, and then I did go through and do it. Created a version, I think I do have it here. I don't know. I did do it, but it dropped me out. So what I want to do is maybe I need to, oh, there it is. This is actually a huge image, so we should be able to bring this up. I did go ahead and mock up because I just can't help myself sometimes. Kind of one concept, but I don't know if there's a way I could title these. I definitely want to call this, yeah, this is just our initial draft. Initial draft. There we go. Initial draft of the dungeon. And I think this demonstrates actually a few things, just looking at this, what I did here. So we went through, we did the first steps, we kind of got in it. It gave us a nice, like I said, first draft. If I had to run this, we went through this, it took us about an hour, came up with all this stuff. If I had to run it, if my game was that evening, I could run it. And it wouldn't be terrible. It's got a few things in there, but it wouldn't be maybe the most memorable thing ever. Of course, a lot of that memorability is not going to come from the dungeon design itself. It's going to come with everything that comes with the dungeon. But if, say, I usually I think if we have the time, we want to put out the best thing that we can. Especially if I think in terms of, I always like to think of like places that, can I reuse this? Could I have this be the first part of something deeper? Do I want to encourage the players to come back and look at things and maybe give things a fresh glance, think to themselves, maybe there are secrets that we missed. Maybe there's something we could go back to. Maybe I want to build this into the entrance to a mega dungeon. So I think this is kind of the first impression of a space. It's fine if it was just kind of a simple place, but maybe we want to look at it, well, if I have the time, and I certainly have the intention, I want to put in the effort, then we take that first pass, we take that initial draft, we want to come back and give it at least a couple more swings through. So if you're thinking about it, that we started this prep and we're being timely and we're being conscientious about our game, and say our sessions are on Saturdays, and we go through and we do this initial draft on the Sunday, the day after the game, and now we have essentially a week we know where the party's going, we know they're coming here. Now I've got a week to prep. This was my first day. Work on it, then sleep on it for a day or so, come back to it on the Monday or Tuesday and think, okay, that was a great first draft, but what can we do to kind of up it a notch? I mean, one, there are still things that ultimately we want to do. We don't have a wandering monster list. We only know our basic factions. We know we've got, let's see, can I indent this in? I don't think there's a way to indent it, or is there? We know we've got, well, here, I'll just do this instead. We've got goblins and undead. So we do know that. We don't know yet what other creatures. I think I mentioned giant centipedes, which are kind of my basic, the trash pandas of the underworld. Giant centipedes. Think of something else. We know that we mentioned that the goblins and the undead are antagonistic. They do not like each other. Sebastian says it seems pretty crafty for a goblin lair. They like it. Yeah, I think so. This idea I had, which was I was thinking about this, and I kind of and this is the this is the other thing. I think we all go through this. Like I started going on these rabbit holes of like, ooh, what about this? What about that? And I had to stop myself, not because they're not great ideas, but because I'm trying to do all this together on stream. And to me, I was thinking like I could just add all this stuff in here, and I had all this great stuff yesterday evening. For some reason, it was just a gold mine of, or at least as far as ideas I liked for myself. Like, ooh, what about this? I thought, you know what, I'll have to remember to bring it up, but I kind of lay them aside because we're not there yet. So the idea I had about goblins, and this could be goblins in the world, maybe this is more of a fairy tale, sort of whatever, or this could just be this group of goblins, but I had this concept of these goblins being a little bit like fantasy Jawas, and that what they do is they try to find these places, pick out the easy loot, sell it, the trinkets, the easy stuff, but they're not strong enough. They're not maybe numerous enough in the way they need to take on things. So they'll find a place like a tomb, hack their way into it. They'll live there for a while. They'll try to clean out all the easy stuff, use it as their home base, clean it out, and then maybe move on. This particular group of goblins will hang out here for a while, maybe a long time, depending on the size of the space and whatever's going on. And then they might afterwards, we've picked this place as clean as we can. We've gotten everything out of it that we've found. And now we're going to move on. The other thing I thought about, which is interesting, which for me anyway, was that, well, here they have these elements, which we talked about in the first stream, that there's kind of powerful, or at least more powerful than them, undead in these burial chambers. Specifically, these 3 rooms here, and maybe even stuff around in here. And there's doors here. The goblins don't want anything to do with that. However, by layering near these things that are powerful, if they can figure out either what the patterns of those things are, how to kind of appease them, how to just stay out of their way, it's kind of nice because it's like it's as if you are sort of aligned to the bully, or at least maybe you're not aligned to the bully, but the bully lives between you and other things. So you're thinking, you know what, this bully's going to beat the crap out of me, but we'll figure out how to stay out of its way. But guess what? If somebody tries to hunt us down, that same thing that's going to beat the crap out of us is going to beat the crap out of them. So let's just let's see what we can do to try to figure out a way we can make a living arrangement, either through diplomacy, and in this case, undead. They're fairly mindless. These are not intelligent undead. So in that case, they do have a pattern. They're going to stay in some area around, at least the way I have understood here, they're going to stay in some area around where they're buried. These two rooms, this one, there might be some wandering in here, but basically they're hanging out in here. They're not following down these tunnels. So the goblins can be sort of quick or just don't stop. The undead are slow, move around in here, yet they know that, let's say, if some band of adventurers is coming in here, they know to maybe bang open these doors. Maybe these undead will travel if the doors are open. Like they don't understand the tunnels and stuff. It's not part of the anatomy of the place as the undead know it, so they ignore it, but maybe they'll go through doors. These areas, maybe even there's some, so that if say adventurers came in here, maybe the goblins flee back, bang open those doors, head down here, maybe try to ambush them by this hole, given that they hope that the undead will maybe push them this way, then they get them trapped. Bada bing, bada boom, you've got the party down in the pit, which may be where the giant centipedes or the gelatinous cube or some other nastiness is, and that's on top of the fact that it's a 20 or 30 foot drop. So you have some good ideas there. Oh, the chat has been super active, which I love. Let's see. Sebastian also says some of the more intelligent creatures could benefit from industrial engineering or structural layout. Absolutely. Dave mentions a golem, perhaps. I was thinking these kind of statues I just threw in there. I gave them, I was thinking Egypt, and inside of Dungeon Draft, they had these Sphinx-looking creatures, so I put them here. These could definitely be some kind of golem or construct. Fluffy the Griffin says, I like adding secret rooms that are easy to discover if the party mapper is on point. Ian says, I feel bad for the undead goblins trapped between two worlds. Could be. Brian Smith says, they sound exactly like an adventuring party. And then the Dave says, maybe their tactic is luring adventuring parties in to clear the bad guys, and then they go in and loot the stuff the adventurers left behind. That's another thing, right? That's an absolute, could be another another aspect. What I liked about the Jawa idea is I'm trying to I think it's a good concept to get away from, like, are all these things just kind of hostile, right? Are goblins, like, kind of like, what are they? Like, we're going to put them in dungeons, we're going to put them in these places, but we want to open things up. It's like, well, they're just not hostile. They're just not like, but like, what are they doing there then, right? Like, what are you doing in this dungeon? Like, you only have a couple of things. Either and one of them is you're doing the same thing that kind of everybody else is doing, other than maybe either you're making your lair there, and this stuff that's in there is kind of, you hope is going to be the material for whatever it is you're doing, or you're trying to loot the place. So I thought, well, what if they're trying to loot it? And maybe it's even known. And we can get to that later, because I do want to get into some parts of kind of how you would tie this into, say, an adventure concept. But I had this idea that the goblins are looting this stuff out, and what are they doing with the loot? They're doing the same thing everyone else does. They're selling it. So what you have is a mechanism from hidden tomb to goblins who then are selling trinkets and things and the small bits and pieces from the tomb that, if they're identifiable in some way, then lead people. It could be the party, it could be some other antagonist, to the tomb. So let's just say this was kind of Egyptian themed, right? So okay, they've taken some Ankh amulets, or they found a Coptic jar, and so they take the Coptic jar and they sell it, just like your adventuring party would. They go ahead and they sell it. Then somebody that moves down, so maybe they sell it to some guy who decides to sell it to somebody else, and it goes down the line. And sometime later ends up in the hands of someone who sees it for what it is. And perhaps there's legends about things that are buried somewhere in here. Maybe this family were powerful, maybe they were rich, maybe they knew something, or they owned something that was lost when the last of their line was lost. Someone's going to see that Coptic jar or that Ankh symbol or whatever it might be and think, aha, I got to find out where this place is, and I can run that trail back. I can find the guy who sold this to the guy who sold it to me. I can try to find the goblins who sold it to the guy, and somewhere in there, I'm going to find where this came from. So you almost have something that you can use in multiple ways. The party could come across something. It could even be something interesting that you end up using in your, what are the party looking for in markets and things like that? Well, they're going to find stuff, right? But okay, so this isn't a magic item, this Ankh, but it's a clue. And if you can have your party start looking for clues, it's a way to get them to these places. Oh, this is a clue. Where did this come from? Oh, well, these goblins that are living out in the hills to the west came in and sold it. Goblins, they're always finding some weird thing or another. And sometimes that could be dangerous, which might be a reason why you might want to stop goblins, because who knows what they're unleashing when they just start crashing into tombs. So I think there's a lot of great directions we could go there. Dave says, are goblins monsters or goblins misunderstood creatures? Well, I think for the most part, creatures are all somewhat understood only by their own kind. And I could definitely see goblins as being misunderstood, right? I mean, in the term monster in D&D, in the technical sense, the meta sense, you go back to the white box, humans are monsters. Anything not a PC, if it's in a dungeon or it's not hired, is technically a monster. But I think it's always good to think about these things in a more complex way, particularly if you want to have goblins and have some of these other humanoids or fae or whatever be things that aren't just things to be killed or dealt with or just used and abused, but see them as kind of something interesting to be interacted with. And I think it's something that players can use as a resource, because if let's say in my world, in this world where this dungeon exists, these goblins are kind of the fantasy equivalent of Jawas, then if you're looking for something weird, if they're trying to find, the party's like, oh, my fighter wants to try to find out where there's some kind of magic two-handed sword, because I love magic two-handed swords. Sure, your sages in town are going to be one option, but you might think, wait a minute, let me see what these local goblins have gotten into, because I know goblins find these tombs and things, and that's where I'm likely to do it. Or maybe the sage gives you the first bit of the clue. Oh yeah, the Jason the Terrible had this Zweihander that was said to be magic, but no one's found his tomb, and it's been lost for centuries. And then you go, oh, interesting, well, maybe some goblins have found it. Maybe I can find a little bit more from them. Maybe I can find some emblem of, what I say his name was, Jason the Terrible, and take it to some goblins, see if they've seen it. So it's stuff that you can kind of use, and it works in a multitudinous ways for you. Fluffy the Griffin says they treat goblins like classic gremlins, little chaos creatures, like to break things, and are just generally menaces, but are totally unaware that what they do is destructive. Totally fine. Brian Smith says they're fond of goblins in the labyrinth. They live under the thumb of the Goblin King, but they do also get to mess with adventurers. I do love the Goblin King. So looking at this, when I think about, okay, this was my first draft. I've got a couple of things here. We have the entrance. It's got some branches. I like having some branches. They kind of go in different places. There's no particular dead ends. Or this one, if you don't discover the hidden door. We talked about how there were two entrances, and this was the one that the originals, this was the original tomb entrance, but when it was expanded, they made a new entrance, and they blocked this one off, and they put this trap here. Then this one also became blocked off, rubble, whatever. But then the goblins, through some other digging, perhaps tunneled their way in, found these. Maybe this was an existing cavern, a cave. Maybe there was some kind of crack or fault in the hill. The ye old earthquake opened up some kind of fault, which kind of set some of this up, and they finished it off, depending on how you like your goblins, how you think about them. And then they kind of went in. Maybe this was more caves, or they did it themselves. And I think I might, in the second draft, maybe I'll merge these more so it doesn't feel like they did so much work. Because in this version, the goblins really did a lot of work. And here I have my secret escape passage. So here I have the kind of the creche, other bedrooms, the sort of main area people are working or sleeping and cooking and all that stuff. Here's their garbage pit that they made, and then here's their other things, and then they scoot through here to go out. Over here where the goblin king, lord, whatever lives, they have that back door so they could scooch out if they need to, and then here's all the babies. But I feel like this feels too far apart, and I might want to merge these in. The other thing is, when I'm looking at this, is I made these places, some of them too small, and they're all very kind of regular shaped. Part of that I liked. I like the idea of here's the entrance, and the rooms are kind of getting bigger until you get to, I was thinking of, okay, here we have your, I think your classic tomb orientation, but I have no idea what a classic tomb looks like. I just have the idea that this was being this very large, almost larger than life, certainly larger than life persona, but this very important person in their time. So I think in terms of building up their tomb, they wanted to increase the impressiveness as you go along. So you go from a small entrance and it keeps getting bigger and bigger until, wow, you're in this giant space, which is where they're actually buried. That was my thought process. And so I just made kind of rooms that just kind of got wider. You know, this one, and this one's a bit wider, then this one's wider and longer, and this one's even wider and even longer. And I do like that, but I think I want to do more with these. You know, if you look at these passages, they're just kind of blah. And then you have here, they did kind of a similar thing. The two minor brothers have basically the same size. Then the major brother has a bigger tomb. And then I thought it made sense that there was some secret path, because this, maybe he's the firstborn, certainly the one that ended up being the most powerful of the kids, wants to then connect themselves to their progenitor, so they make that separate entrance as if to say, like, we're connected. These folks are connected, we're connected. But then I also thought I could have had some more tombs for minors, and I thought about the vaulted ceiling, the big, in the Great Pyramid, there's that vaulted, I forget whatever it's called, but it's got a massive vaulted ceiling. So I thought it would be really nice to take some of these simple passages and just kind of scramble them a little bit. Put some more features in there. Maybe in this super vaulted corridor, they've got some, I'm trying to figure out where I can go to write this stuff down. Family gallery, maybe I'll put, actually, can I duplicate that? No, did that not work? What happened? Something has quit on me. Hold on a minute. Let me refresh. Oh my gosh, oh boy. All right. It's giving me a whole bunch of something that I didn't want. All right, I obviously goofed. Oh no, it's putting all these images in. I had a bunch of images and I didn't mean to drag them all in here. Okay, I don't know how that happened, because these were on like a file explorer window, but now it's going to spend forever doing that. So let me, while that's working their way through all that and I can delete it, let me see what's going on in the chat. The Dave says, the goblins wouldn't do that much work to dig out the area out. There should be something very valuable in there the goblins really want, that they know where it is. I don't necessarily think that has to be true, the Dave, but yeah, again, going back to what I was saying before, it's probably, if they're going to do that much work, I think it's somewhere that they definitely feel like is going to be a fairly permanent residence if they don't know something is valuable there. So in terms of it, yeah, we're thinking this has got to be something that they kind of really want. That's why I think in my second draft, as I'm going through and removing, oh my gosh, there's so many. There's like 450. Look at that. Holy cow. Well, I'm glad. Oh, so you can see that the capacity for this program is excellent, but I don't know how to just grab a whole bunch of stuff though. Can I do that? Oh, wait, that did work. I think in terms of there could be various reasons, I guess, for why they did so much work. But like I said, I think that ultimately I'm going to alter that because I don't want it to be that much work. I want it to be more. I want it to be more kind of connected and not that either that or there was some other cave framework that they grabbed. You could have, depending on what you wanted to do, have some sort of is it the what is it the Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Kings kind of thing where you have lots of tombs that are next to each other, and so they just kind of broke into one, looted it, and broke into the others and made those your home. There's a couple different ways you could do it. Let's see. Dave says, when mapping, it's important to remember that the world is in 3 dimensions, having tunnels move over and around, giving places you can approach from different levels. Derek Man says, you never know what's going to happen in a live stream. Indeed. And I did win solitaire. It does exactly what it looks like. I've now hit the delete button a couple times. Oh, wait a minute. Page isn't responding. I want to wait. Hold on. Maybe that's it. Let's see if it can delete all this because I don't want to save it because it's saving it with all the stuff in it. And if I save it and I leave, then I really am going to have to go through this. I don't know if I could Control Z. There's just so much here now. I probably could have. Maybe Control Z would have been the best option. I panicked, everybody. I panicked. Dave's point about 3 dimensions is a good one, and I do want to get on that because that's a big part of jacazing the dungeons is looking at 3 dimensions. The only issue with it, and it's not an issue with the spaces. There's 2 things, right? So 3 dimensions are definitely important, and I do like to bring those things in. However, we don't often. A lot of times we don't architect that way. It's going to depend a lot on what the space is. And it is good to have, I think, in terms of having multiple entrances and exits, I think it is good to think about, well, how high is the ceiling? And I think I even thought about that. One of the rooms that there could be a hole in the ceiling where the party could come in. At the same time, it can get convoluted to track all this. We don't have great mapping software to, you know what, maybe I'm going to refresh and see if it, I hit refresh, see if that does something. Other than that, I'm not sure what to do. I'll just have to clean it up later. Might have to go to Dungeon Map 2. Dungeon Map 2 Electric Boogaloo. But we want to make sure that we're doing it. We're not getting overdone. Oh no, it did keep it. Okay. Maybe I gotta do it in smaller pieces. All right, thank you, Ouija. I don't need to see that. Everything in moderation, right? Let's see if I can get this to go. But yes, 3-dimensionality. 3-dimensionality is good. I think it gets the jacazing and dungeon stuff is awesome, but even in the jacazing stuff, if you look at, say, Caverns of Thracia, it's not like some kind of crazy, everything's going on. There's still lots of just what we would consider our conventional rooms and spaces. It is that time of the day. See if I can copy over all the new stuff. That might be easier. But now it's just, and it keeps telling me to wait. All right, what I'm going to have to do, yeah, okay, that's that. All right, we'll just work with this for right now. And I'll come back and I'll clean all that up later. We'll just have to make some notes. Let's make some notes. So going back to kind of this fleshing out concept, don't want to waste so much time. I will see if I can get another thing going. Oof. Wonderful things on the internet. I want to merge in these goblin areas more. I do like these where they might have broken through and made some kind of cuttings in here. Kind of gate tomb robbery type stuff, right? That's just, but I like that. What I like is this term that I've heard a few times. It's kind of these sort of loops, having different ways to get around. The first time I heard it, and I'm sure it's not the first time it actually came up, was in a computer video game design when they were talking about making these. I forget whatever the word for. Basically, kind of AI, allow your AI to kind of auto generate levels. And when they were going through the iterating through the various algorithms to kind of get that sort of generation going in a way that created spaces that made sense, this concept of having loops. So I like the idea of having sort of different layers connect themselves. So you kind of have a loop here. We've got one, we've got a loop here. I was thought about, well, should there be another one, something maybe going from here to here, especially if I make these spaces more complicated. They could have some, would the original tunnelers have had, maybe they would have put something secret here. All kinds of stuff like that. I do think in terms of having full three-dimensionality, I envision that this space here, this family gallery, I want to make it bigger. I want to make sure, and this won't come across in the diagram, but taller. I want to put some kind of nooks in here. Maybe there's some other things. We could have fun with what's in the nooks. What could be in the nooks? And then I think the other thing is we want to think about when we're going through and this sort of taking it up a notch is establishing patterns. Establishing motifs. Let me just go back, see if I can get this open. All right, close that. Add a board. Just blank. Empty board. Dungeon map 2. There we go. All right, we're back in business. Or I should say that clearly, we are back in business. So when we're talking about what are we doing here? We're fleshing out the dungeon. We want to think about the connections between factions. Think about the layout. Can we amp up our designs? Can we emphasize the three-dimensionality? Go wild with the nooks, but be more restrained with the crannies, says Ovaltine Patrol. Always. Art says, if people aren't insane like I am, I've designed at high-level dungeons and loops using relational databases. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fun and cool stuff, and if I was more of a program person at this point, I would think like, ooh, there could be some really interesting ways to do it. I feel like at some point they're going to get, with all the AI-driven stuff, all these AI models, they'll get more that are doing things, not just like making funky pictures of Van Gogh and mixing up Van Gogh with Picasso and then creating a face, but doing things like putting in a whole bunch of dungeons or some other kind of design like that and coming up with new designs. Somebody will figure it out. Hey, Propane Daddy, you are a propane loving man. Yeehaw! Well, that's something. Propane and propane accessories. Let me see if there's anything else I mixed. Where's the bowling alley go? Yeah, we're not into this. We're not talking about the mega dungeons, mega dungeon things, right? Motifs, patterns. So one of the things I had thought about was this motif of, so I'd come up with this motto or this kind of thing that would show up. Whoops. So here's the motto. I'll put it in the quotes in. This was one of my brain, you'll say either this, if you enjoy this, you might say, oh, this is either a good idea or a bad one. So I had this idea of this concept. I was trying to think about. So one of the things I was thinking about is, okay, we have a couple of traps, and I can pull the map. Where's the map? Got a couple of traps. This one, which I thought maybe is open, but then I started thinking about, well, maybe it is open, but maybe there's a little bit more to it, which I'll get into in a second. And I thought about maybe there's some other traps around here, especially in the mostly undisturbed spaces. Maybe there's something here. Maybe the goblins have triggered it. Maybe they've even jerry-rigged it so it's now triggers somewhat differently, and we can use that. But there's some traps around. And I was also thinking about, well, how are these places? What's going on in here maybe to protect them besides the undead? Things like that. And I also wanted to get into, what if I wanted to have some more things here that I wanted to kind of hint at? So what could I do? What could I do? So I came up with this idea that would basically be a theme, a motif. And the motif is that, okay, statues will gaze up at something which will pictorially, I think that's a word. No. What is the word? No. That will, I'll just put represent a real thing below that area. So I'm kind of stealing the as above, so below that comes off in lots of, mostly more if you've read any kind of esoteric literature, fiction or nonfiction, it comes up a fair amount. Things like Gnostic stuff, as above, so below kind of thing. So this is my takeoff on that. And what the idea was that you'll have statues in various areas. And I only put a couple of them here, and I mentioned it before. We've got these there were these 4 sphinxes looking at things. We have these statues here looking at things. I thought, we didn't put anything in this room because we really had just given it just the barest of description. We didn't put anything in this room. But what if we had a lot of these statuary, and the statuary would all be having, particular ones would look at things. And then on the ceiling was some symbolic representation of something that was actually below. So let me give you an example back here. We'll say there's a statue in this. Oh, it don't need to be that tight. Oh my gosh. Making me dizzy. There we go. We will say that there's a statue in this corner here. This statue is looking at the ceiling that would be over this pit. And in the ceiling, I thought, well, there could either be painted, or maybe there's even it could be carved, could be sculpted, that shows spears pointing down, right? Spearheads, spears, sticks, stalagmites, stalactites, I think. Pointing down, something heavy, this things, a pit, basically some kind of symbolic pit that's above. So they're looking up at the ceiling, and over the spot, there's this symbolic, you could read it anyway. It doesn't have to be necessarily a drawing of with the words "here is a pit," but basically some kind of symbolism that might signify, oh, there's a pit. And then beneath it is the pit. Rex Sun says line of sight puzzles are tight. Well, I guess. I didn't really think of it in terms of line of sight, but yeah, I guess it is a line of sight. And Brian Smith says goblins would definitely write graffiti on the statues and draw mustaches on them. Maybe so. Michael says it should be subtle enough that it's a message for true believers so that interlopers are sure to stumble into the trap. Brian Smith says they're lactose intolerant. But again, Terrence isn't here. Brian Smith picking up the slack with the bad the bad thing. Yes, I agree, Michael. You're usually if you're just trapping something in this case, I think originally, and I don't know in terms of the Egyptian things, I think in reality at some point they just wanted to hide it but I imagine here that family would still come to visit, or at least that was the intent. So yes, you do want to call out the traps because you want your great grandkids to come see your amazingness without without killing them, right? But it is kind of subtle. So you look at the statue, you could look at, oh, the statue's here. Maybe even the entire ceiling has worked, but only this particular motif in the middle, and that tells you what's kind of below it. Now that, of course, is for a trap, but it could you could use this for lots of good things also. And one of the things I thought about was, what if in this major room, what if we decide that it isn't just a simple person's buried here, but there's something more to it. I want to have another level, and I want to have it that the guy is actually in the tomb, maybe, or someone's in there, but maybe it's, if you move the entire sarcophagus or something, if you do some kind of trick to it, then you'll see there's stairs going down. So what if then all these statues were looking up at the ceiling, or looking, up at the ceiling above this tomb, and the ceiling had maybe a spiral leading into darkness, and that spiral indicates the stairs. And if we have enough of these patterns, and the players explore enough, and some of them are triggered and some of them are not triggered, they'll put that in their brain. It might get in their brain. Now, they may not find it. They might need other reasons to come back and keep searching. But I thought that was a neat motif, because if they do discover it, then it's something they can apply throughout the dungeon, at least the non-goblin parts of the dungeon, and perhaps find a whole bunch of interesting things about it. So if we had our long room with a bunch of a bunch of those alcoves, maybe we could have some of those statues are just staring straight ahead, but the ones that are staring up, that one's staring up as opposed to straight ahead, that means something. Again, you can kind of figure it out. So I had that idea for a motif. The statues that are looking at things, particularly looking up, but the looking up actually indicates what's below them. So kind of, and we could have this show up somewhere. This could maybe be it could show up in the dungeon itself. It could also show up, if we're getting in terms of, I don't want to jump ahead, but in terms of getting a sort of a construct for the adventure that this might be a part of, that might be something that gets tossed to the players in some way, a scrap on a treasure map that leads to this place. Could be a lot of different reasons for how this particular model gets into the player's hands outside the dungeon itself. Let's see. Michael says, if it's family, you do something like have your family crest or subtle callbacks to important ancestors denoting safe paths. What would only this family recognize? Yeah, it doesn't have to be a family. I mean, there could be many ways, right? There could be a lot of stuff. It could be, we could use the family crest. Sure. I mean, I think there are lots of things to do. This could also say something about their religion, right? We could tie this phrase in there. I think you're right in the general sense that the key thing that you want to do if you're going to come up with this kind of riddle is it should have linkages that can be followed. The family crest. Okay, we can recognize that crest, something of that. Okay, it's a religious thing. We can recognize the iconography that goes with that. If it's something that they say to each other all the time, or it's something, right? You want to have those links. It could be multiple. It could be a cultural thing. It could be, there's a number of things that it could be, depending on, like we're talking about, if only the family was meant to come here, sure. This is also a ruling family, so remember, maybe it's not just the inner circle. It might also be other things. It might be they used to be kind of a national visit the tomb day. Who knows? It could be a lot of things. It could be more of a cultural thing, and there could be other reasons for why they came in. Like the stuff with what is it? I forget those things about the Da Vinci Code. Right. So someone are putting it in there, but they're putting it in not just for their things, but for other people who may not know. Maybe if there is something really important buried there, something that they know is going to be needed in the future, that they need to want to transmit this beyond just their family, because it's like, okay, Arthur's got Excalibur. We don't really expect that his grandkids are going to come look for him for Excalibur, but it might be someone 1,000 years later. So what kind of clues can we give them so that if they're true followers of Arthur, but not necessarily his family, they can find Excalibur? So you want to have something, but you don't, it doesn't have to be, it could be, you could just want to think about what makes sense and for the context, really, right? R says, I always make a tall dungeon with the pit trap being an over-present threat as you work your way downwards through floors. That's a good one. The pit traps also transmitting between floors is great, especially when you come across them from the bottom where you look up and you see the closed, if there is a closed trap door, or you just see this shaft and maybe there's bones and like super old dried blood at the bottom. Michael likes my National Visit the Tomb Day. Could, could be the birthday of the old, a birthday of the old king, where you go and you'd visit, and then of course it fell out. But this is definitely one of something to think about in terms of, well, what can we do to take it up a notch, right? Think of the motifs, think of the patterns. And the reason why these motifs, these patterns are good is because what you do is you set up the patterns, and then you can use, when the pattern doesn't work, becomes that flag to your party. Assuming they can find the pattern, then where that pattern they should be looking for. And this is much like with mapping, right? This is the old days of mapping, when your dungeon maps took up an entire page of graph paper, and you pretty much knew that every square was filled in with something when you were mapping it, and you saw that, oh, there's this area, and look, there's this nice big area here that's not filled in. That's when you start looking for secret doors. You're looking for, this is where the pattern breaks. We know that every square foot of my paper should be filled with rooms and corridors, and here is a stretch without a room and without a corridor. There's probably a secret door here, because goodness knows we know the GM filled this thing up. Of course, that's kind of a meta pattern, right? We tend not to want to engage with that too much, but it's the same kind of thing. Establish your pattern, establish your motifs. Then when the pattern breaks, or you can think about why and where the patterns break, that's where your really interesting stuff is, right? This is the one thing with this thing. I always... Let's see. Michael says, pit traps are a natural place for treasure to end up too. Centuries of adventurers must have fallen down there. Yep. Adventurers, other creatures. You could have a whole trash pit down there. That's why I like to have like creatures down there too, like your giant centipedes and other things that might be living down there if there's enough traffic, that is. But yeah, all kinds of stuff can end up. And I want to say it was that we looked at a while ago, a 4th edition dungeon that was very interesting, but they actually used the pit trap as a secret door, a secret entrance to get to another part of the dungeon. So if you went down and you explored the bottom of the pit trap, you could get to another part, which I thought was a really cool thing to do. That pit was an open pit, so you didn't have to trigger it; it was just already there. But it gave you a reason to want to go down, or it rewarded you for spending the time to actually go down to the bottom of the pit. And those are patterns you can pick on as well. So yeah, we could have had this pit. And if we think about this as if there are multiple levels, and that's the other thing, right? This is flat. Do we want to have multiple levels? Not even just in terms of classical dungeon levels, but just, right? So where's this pit? Maybe this pit links, we could have an underground kind of natural cavern that links wherever this goes and the bottom of the pit. Maybe that's something that was there. Maybe something still lives there. Maybe even we could say maybe that's how the goblins got in. That there's some natural, I don't know, a ye old underground stream that goes down here. And they actually how they got into the place was they came up through here. And this could actually, maybe there was a fountain that they broke. Right? So we can, and that's actually, I'll make a note of that. So, because that's kind of another way we can kind of integrate their experience with what's going on. Was the midden pit a prior and how the goblins got in originally? Maybe that's a question we could put. Let's see. Fluffy the Griffin says, we got a bunch. Hey, Carlos Ramos. Glad you made it. This was maybe this one I had a little bit of issues. Hopefully it doesn't muck up. I apologize to the people of the future who may watch this and got to think about why the heck am I spending time where when I was goofing around with that first, I had to copy my notes over or start a new notes page because I accidentally brought in a ton of images that basically broke that page. So apologies for that little bit of dead space as I was trying to fix that. So hopefully, maybe I don't know if I can clip it out on YouTube after the fact, but Glad folks are hanging in there. LF OSR says subvert expectations. Yep, that's always a good thing. Flavor the Griffin says hiding things inside traps is one of their favorite things. I like that too. Michael says they built a gauntlet on a second level, room after deadly room. There were pit traps on the level above, which actually provided shortcuts through the gauntlet. It hurt to fall, but you skip a few rooms. I got you, Michael. Don't worry, no worries about the spelling. I got you. So yeah, so that's another thing we could do, right? That what linkages. I'm gonna say it's unorthodox. Unorthodox. Oh, what are you doing? No, I'm not trying to clip the page. Thank you. Great. Multiple access paths. So we want to think about, well, we have this, we got our first draft. We got some ways things are linked together, but I really like this idea of that there's maybe a natural cavern down here. We could put some running water through there. Somehow they had the water, they were able to pipe it up maybe through magic. I don't know, whatever. They had it coming up through the fountain. The goblins broke all that down, and now it's just a hole. We can even have the workings down there that seems like fountain. We could talk about some stuff up here that maybe would clue the fact this used to be a fountain. We'll just change this from being goblin works to original masonry. This could even be another room. It might be interesting. We could think about what that fountain, or what did that fountain originally mean? What maybe that ties into these things that Michael and I were talking about with maybe there's this calls out to the crest, the family, something to do with water. Maybe there's the deity or something else they worship, or something cultural has to do with this water and this fountain. And there's traces of it here. There's another way we can kind of bring in these thematic. We can think about what are the thematic elements, and then we want to take those thematic elements. Maybe we came up with that theme of water here, but now we can apply that, right? So now we have this theme of water, let's say in some kind of water, something to do with religious and water, maybe a ritual cleansing. So what does that mean? Maybe some of the things we have in these other rooms will now trigger, you were supposed to have water here. Maybe it's important. Why is the water here between this room and this room? Well, now we think about, okay, they wanted you to ritually cleanse yourself. Maybe in that, for this culture, maybe it was washing your hands, giving your face and hands a rinse. That's kind of what they wanted. So you were supposed to do that before you go in the next room. So maybe there are things in here that trigger, if you touch it, would say your hand is still wet. If your hand is wet and you touch it, that signifies that you have cleansed yourself. If your hand's dry, that's not. So then maybe there's a trap or something else in here that will do different things depending on whether you're wet, your hands are wet, or your hands are dry, because you're supposed to have cleaned it. Maybe there would be a matching fountain down here, or maybe we'll rework these so that everything would come into this room, would be kind of the central room in a sense of the complex, which would also help to note its importance. If this is the room where kind of everything is coming into before it branches off, then that will signify, at least in an architectural sense, that this is important. And hopefully that might lead to the players thinking this is a central room, and we can build up what that means. What kind of fountain was this? Maybe it was very big and ornate. So sure, the goblins broke the heck out of it and it's no longer really functioning, but you can still see that the former grandeur that this must have been. And we can think about what writing that maybe has been graffitied but scratched out, but maybe you can get some bits and pieces of it that might help set the tone. Maybe you'll find a fragment of a hand and a head that's like giving you that kind of washing it. But of course that could now be confused, because maybe it means you're supposed to close your eyes. Some fun stuff for the party to dabble around with. Brian Smith calls it the trap of moistness. It's right. You gotta be moist. The Dave says like washing at a Shinto shrine. Absolutely. Brian Smith says, and the goblins keep a pet alligator in it. Could be. I mean, I was thinking that this is now a pit, and that's where they're dumping their garbage. But sure, if we wanted to keep it filled with water, that could be something, right? It could be. We could do that too. So there's lots of different directions we could take it. But those are the kind of things. We have our first initial sort of simple level of the dungeon, and like I said, this would be workable. I think the thing is that it's, and I saw this on I think it was on Reddit. Somebody posted, and it was funny because when I looked at it, I'm like, my goodness, what I've done and what this other dungeon had done, which was the Delian Tomb, by Matt Colville. It's not dissimilar in some ways. There's goblins, there's a tomb. Like his is they're not the same layout, and the goblins have more of a purpose. So in this one, the goblins are more they're kind of like fellow adventurers, right? They're just looking for loot, and they're kind of made a home, or permanent or semi-permanent home there. In the Delian Tomb case, the goblins are specifically there to perform some kind of ritual. But somebody dinged it on the OSR Reddit for being very kind of linear, which I think is kind of missing the point of the dungeon. And this is this part where I feel like people can go to. I understand that we really want to look at these things, and that's where it's kind of like when Michael was talking about the three dimensionality. I think that stuff's awesome. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't try to add all that in, but it's not always the. It doesn't have to be the be all end all of everything. And the Delian Tomb, I think, is very popular with folks. I think it's mostly 5th edition, but this person, I was taking the Delian Tomb and kind of retrograding it for an OSR type game, or I think it was still a 5e game, but like an OSR flavored 5e game. But that don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If I had needed this dungeon for a game and I only had time to go through that round one, I think I could work this dungeon. I think people would have fun in there. It's not necessarily one that I'd want to send off and post somewhere, or sell it on drive-through, or do something and saying, look, this is an amazing dungeon. No. But would this work in a practical way for giving the players some things to do, giving them an interesting location? Sure. Now, that being said, if we have the time and we're taking the time, can we make it a much more interesting place that's a more in-depth? Maybe this first version of the dungeon, they'd get through in a session, or even less than a session. Maybe they don't hit all those. Maybe they bounce through, boom, 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 done. Now I'm going through, I'm adding more details. Okay, now I want, maybe some of these doors will be magical. Maybe this door here, I want linked to that concept of the fountain. They have to touch it with wet hands to open the door. Otherwise, they're going to have to figure out some other way in. That now becomes something. Maybe that gives them, now we have these loops. So it's not the single way in here, because if they come through here and they find this secret door here, which might have a statue staring at it, seeing our concept of statues, maybe there's a statue somewhere in this room that's staring at that secret door somehow, or something, giving some other, we could set that up. Maybe they find this, then they'll find this, and then they'll get in. So it's not that they can't get through, but now we're adding some extra touches. We're adding things that hopefully will make it more memorable. These other things is when, even beyond the dungeon itself, because the dungeon doesn't stand alone. It's going to be in the world. It's going to be connected to the world. Now I have all these elements that give me world building clues. If I'm working out an adventure and I'm starting from the dungeon, I now have these things. Okay, I have what was a very important family to some culture that's probably no longer existing, or at least not in that form. We don't know yet what they're good for, what they want, but we know there's something to do now with some kind of water religion. And we know that was important to them. We know those motifs are in there. We also have this concept of their family, whether we want to call it a family quote or something about them. This eternally I gaze above at what lies below. It's kind of above below motif. So we have these other things. I might want to think about also maybe some kind of crest, some other kind of symbology we might want to use. So now we have all that stuff. And when we're going to build out from there, if we're going to think about, well, what adventure is going to get the party from town to here? Now we kind of have some of that. And we also have some of that. Well, how did the word of this tomb get out? Well, the goblins got out. It got out because the goblins are selling bits and pieces from the dungeon, and someone's going to figure out there must be more here. And people know, because maybe these particular goblins or all the goblins in our world, they know that these goblins are finding these spots, and they also know there's probably stuff the goblins aren't hitting because they're not prepared to, or they don't want to take those kinds of risks or whatnot, that somebody else might. They can get there. And either they can then, if they're mean and nasty people, maybe they'll say, well, we'll just kill the goblins and take over, or we'll make a deal with the goblins, or whatever it is, right? If we go there, we can find it. If we can figure out where the goblins are, they've probably gotten something, much like if you found the Jawas were bringing back, bits and pieces of some kind of Corellian freighter. Maybe you think if we can track the Jawas back, we'll get to the mother lode, so to speak. All right, some more stuff in the chat, which is awesome. Carlos says they're most definitely stealing this trap of moistness idea. The thought process behind it, though, is amazing. Oh, appreciate it. R says Goblin Feces hole. What a quality stream. Hey, people gotta, people always forget. You gotta go to the, what do you gotta, do something. I mean, you're pooping. It's gotta go somewhere. At least it's in a hole and not just piled up in corners. The goblins, they're not disgusting people. The Dave says maybe the undead are moving around because it no longer has water in it. The players can get water to flow through it. The undead will be restful and stop moving. That's another good thing that you might even have, or something like there might be. Maybe there's offering bowls in certain areas. Oops, let me put that in there. Offering bowls fill with water to calm undead? Question mark. Ian says they ran the Delian Tomb in BX. The dwarf is now a paladin. Well, you see, and that's the thing, right? I think that the stuff you get, this stuff I'm doing, the stuff you hear online is awesome, right? But work with the tools you have, work with the time you have. Don't get down in the dumps because you're not meeting all these things. Well, geez, my tomb doesn't have 800 entrances, and I don't have stuff coming in 4-dimensional hyperspace, and I don't. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. It'll be fine. Players, I think, will not even likely to really appreciate everything. But I think the more that you can add these things in will give your places, I think, more legs in terms of repeated visits that you can build off of, because there's going to continue to be things that you can use to add more depth to the experience. If you have a very simple place and it's just bang, 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 then you get to the end of it, you're done. I imagine the Delian Tomb, there's no reason for anyone to go back there once they've dealt with it. That's it. You went through, boom, boom, got what's in, you're out. That's fine. And there's plenty of places that's all you're really looking for. They're going to come in, they got to get the thing that's in there, and they're going to go in, they're going to get it, they're leave, and they're never going to come back. But I do like to think of places, well, maybe this is the start of something. This isn't just a singular place, but they're going to uncover potentially that there is something hidden here that was covered up intentionally, whatever, that there is more here, and they might need to come back here. Maybe if there is a cavern under here, maybe there's something going on in the cavern, and I want the players to maybe experience this in different ways on more than one occasion. So having that extra depth gives them things that they can continually discover about the place, and then rewards that, because as they learn more, as they experience more, they'll be able to unlock more secrets of the place. But if I didn't have time and this wasn't that kind of place, this is a one shot and I'm just doing it and I'm running it and we got 3 hours, let's, fine. Let's see. Sebastian says, this makes me wonder, maybe the players just go on a quest and stumble on something much bigger to investigate, so they just ditch their employer for a more important mission. I mean, you could very well have that. And I mean, that's kind of the thing that happened with my players. They went in kind of expecting one thing, and they realized some other things that led them into other paths. I kind of like that stuff. And it allows you to, what I like about it, I guess, is that you're putting in a lot of time, right? So we're on now 2 hours of working on this. And this was we don't have a ton of it to show for it. I'll make another map that will hopefully do a good job of incorporating these things that we're talking about. So we'll see how we're kind of building it out. And I didn't even get to doing some of the things that are more, maybe the most important in terms of just running it, which is we haven't gotten into kind of the actual stuff that's in the dungeon. We know we've got goblins, we know we've got undead, but we haven't basically done the inventories of the rooms. But of course, the rooms are still in a little bit of a gray space. We're moving them around and doing things. So we want to wait. And this is the kind of thing that I think maybe I won't have another kind of, we won't go through the same process again, but I think you could see how if you have more time, if I had a month, maybe I want to iterate this on a few different ways. But like I said, I want to make places, if I'm going to invest the kind of time in there to do this, so I'm going to invest multiple days, potentially weeks, multiple hours. I want a place that I can come back to. Oh, there's something more happening there. You didn't find the whole thing. You've only gotten the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. There's all that iceberg that's left to explore. Brian Smith says, maybe a broken statue they find in one room to place in another. Could be. Yeah, you could definitely have broken statues. Maybe the goblins broke the statues, and you have to put the right head on the right statue to find the correct gaze spot. Sure. down there. Old Team Patrol says, in some Jewish rites, a ewer is used in hand washing. Perhaps the goblins have stolen a ewer from the fountain that has a special reaction when used in the ritual hand washing. That's a good idea. And I kind of like those kind of magic items that are sort of local. It's not really going to do anything outside, but it's kind of locally. The Dave says, so your goblins act like Jawas, it would be wise as a player to follow them around. Yeah, I think it would. Dave says, the best dungeon is the one your players are in right now. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Just you want to get playing. And I think what I try to highlight, I think with a lot of the stuff that I do is you want to be playing. You want to be getting the most bang for your buck. And I think spending more time on your dungeons is great if you intend to reuse them. And that becomes something, a resource you can reuse. If you're just going to use it once, then just do the amount of work that you need to get the job done, so to speak. Don't put a whole bunch of work in something that your players are going to spend 5 minutes in. It's not worth it. They're not going to notice. And that's just going to lead to this frustrations of I'm doing so much stuff and nobody's reading it, looking at it, whatever. Ian says, so the Delian Tomb was actually a 2-trip dungeon. They came with folks from the tavern to save the blacksmith's daughter, but couldn't get into the tomb room, came back later to figure it out, which led to the aforementioned paladin transformation. Yeah, that's cool. That's definitely cool. I think I meant just in the one, I mean, that one, yeah, there was, I think that's kind of the point, I guess, Ian, right? Is there was a mystery that was yet to be solved. So they came back because they want to solve the mystery. So in these dungeons, if you want them to be places where your characters may return to, which will then make the work you're putting to them worthwhile, you want to have mysteries that they might need to percolate on to solve. But then you can, of course, you can also work that into your adventure. So for example, in the Delian Tomb thing, right there, it was that Delian order. Maybe somewhere else that someone, they're like, we'll only talk to somebody, or we need somebody that's of the Delian order. But you're like, but all the Delian order is dead. And then someone goes, remember that tomb? There was something there to do with the order. Maybe if somebody does that, oh, okay, right. And they do it. And then you get a chance to go back to the tomb. And Fluffy the Grim says, one-time use magic items are nice too. They are. Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, I hope we got some use out of this. I apologize for my dalliance at the beginning with dumping 400 some odd photos accidentally into the thing, which kind of killed it. I will go through and clean that out, and then I will merge these two sheets together to get everything in there. I will on the forums.hex.press. There is a topic, a thread for this video. I will, when I get around to it, hopefully later this afternoon, I will drop in an updated map. If you guys have ideas for a map and you have the time and the wherewithal to draw one out, I would love to see it, but I will put together, I'm using Dungeon Draft. There was another one I found I might try. It's more kind of old school. That does the good kind of blue and with the blue kind of graph effect, but I might give it a shot and see how that does. Otherwise, it'll probably be in Dungeon Draft again. And then we'll take it from there. Probably, I'm thinking the next one I'm just going to assume that you can do this fleshing out phase as many times as you want to flesh it out as much as you want. We'll get into the nitty gritty of actually putting the inventory in your dungeon in terms of the creatures and the stuff and whatever loot you want to throw in there. And we'll just keep trucking from there. But thanks everybody for joining. If you could give this a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here watching and you like this, you're not subscribed, please subscribe. That just helps me. And then it also helps you get notified when I post new stuff. The Dave says that I should check out Dungeon Alchemist. It's great for putting in items like tables and chairs and wall hangings. Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Yeah, we have some different sources. I actually didn't get to it, but I had my 1E DMG. I was going to break out for doing some of the filling of stuff, but we'll just save that for next time. So next time I will break out the DMG and we'll get to that. All right. Have a great afternoon. Hey, Elbow Team Patrol, thanks for coming. Have a great afternoon. Everybody else, enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, and I'll talk to you later.